Well, welcome this morning to our intimate group. We really appreciate you guys coming to listen to us speak today. And I'm Natalie Harney. I'm with Insperity. Does everybody know who Insperity is? No, nobody? Okay, my people in the back. So Insperity is a nationwide HR outsourcing company. We provide HR-related services to small and mid-sized companies. Everything from payroll on through HR, full outsourcing, benefits administration, and so forth. But what we really are is a strategic HR company. So how great it is to be here with you two to be able to talk about strategies around your people. So I'd like to introduce Bob and Laci. I think it'd be best if you guys talk a little bit about yourselves and your background first, rather than me just read a bio of who you are. I think it'd be better telling, so go ahead. Bob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Bob Danna. I've been in the business now about 45 years, mostly in knowledge management, learning, performance support, and initially started as a physicist and engineer, recruited by the Nuclear Navy, trained officers and enlisted personnel to operate nuclear reactors aboard submarines and surface ships. Then with 3 Mile Island, if you remember that accident in the late 70s, joined a technology company that was doing most of the remedial action associated with all of the outcomes from that accident, and spent 16 years with them, built them actually, addressing all of that, and then took it literally to every industry vertical. The learnings that we had from the Navy, learnings that we had from the nuclear industry applied everywhere. So, and it was all focused on workforce, because as a physicist, science is great, but people are, have many more variables associated with them, and so it became the interesting thing for me to focus on. So actually helped build them, took them public on the New York Stock Exchange, was on the board of directors for a number of years. Then mid-90s, something else got interesting, which was Y2K. And so actually joined another small startup and helped build them, all focused on workforce. So the bottom line was, with all these technologies going in place, yeah, it was great, but you actually have to have somebody use them. And there was lots of crying going on, and we helped stop some of that crying. This was the workforce crying, right? I mean, training, documentation, online performance support systems, that's when technology really started coming on to the workforce to help them be more productive and actually using all these technologies. So again, grew them, and then joined a research and analyst firm in the mid-2000s, Burson Associates. I don't know if you know them. Actually joined Josh, helped him build Burson Associates, sold that to Deloitte Consulting, was a managing director in the human capital practice in Deloitte Consulting for 5 years, and retired. So I'm a baby boomer retired 2.5 years ago. I'm now an angel investor in a number of different organizations, including Pandexio, executive chairman there, sit on several boards of directors, and now think I still probably have a good 20 years left in me. So we'll see.
We'll see about that.
So just setting a good example for the next generation or 2 or 3 that'll follow. So.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laci Loew. I've been in the human capital and human capital technology business the better part of 3 decades. I am from Chicago, so as I was completing my bachelor's and my master's degrees there, I was working for Motorola and United Airlines. At Motorola, I ran all the worldwide learning services, which was the external client-facing division. At United Airlines, I was running onboard flight operations training. I transitioned out of the Fortune organizations into the research, advisory services, consulting side of HR, accepting work for Accenture, which is also headquartered in Chicago, and I stayed with them until the time, unfortunately, of Enron. After that, I stayed on that side of the business and joined Burson & Associates, which is where I met Bob. And at Burson, again, stayed on the research and advisory services side, running mostly leadership development, succession, talent management. Subsequent to that, did the same for Brandon Hall Group, which is a competitor to Burson, and then opened my own business about 5 years ago doing the same. So today, clients in my own business and for Pandexio, actually through the lens of my own business, I was doing work with a client And that's actually how I met John, the CEO of Pandexio, sitting right here in the front row. The Pandexio was white labeled into their human capital technology. It was called TriBridge. Now it's owned by DXC Technologies. So Pandexio is white labeled into that technology, and I was helping those folks understand the value of Pandexio and their solution. Today, I run the HR thought leadership for Pandexio and some of the market positioning, brand awareness of our solution and its value in the marketplace. So a pleasure to be here with you today to share some of our learnings from 70-some years. Thanks for joining us.
Great. So I think that we're going to learn a lot today from their experience, but I want to know from the room, who needs people? We all need people to do what we do, to grow our businesses. So I think we're going to learn a lot from the data and research that you've done. And I don't know if we need to you want to go on to your first slide, and I'll ask your first question. It looks like the research in which you participated was driven by several global media trends associated with the workforce of the future. Can you share some of your thoughts as to the trends that we all should be thinking about as we plan for our rapidly evolving workforces?
Yeah, that's a good question, Natalie. In fact, I just kind of want to set the stage. So think about what's going on now. It really is a revolution that probably is comparable to the late 90s when we transitioned from a lot of the older technologies to all of the ERP and supply chain management software, et cetera, and then what happened to the workforce with all of that process re-engineering, all of the technologies that were coming in. It really did change the nature of the workforce. We kind of bumped along for the last 20 years with various little changes in technology, but not that much. We're really at a revolution right now, and the revolution is really associated with artificial intelligence, augmentative intelligence, robotics, automation, self-service. We want to make sure that that's kind of thrown in. And now suddenly the workforce, and you're seeing it all over, is being substantially transformed because what they did in the past, which was more transactional based, they don't have to do right now because a robot is taking it over, a bot is taking it over, AI or people themselves. I can go online and make all the reservations I need. I can do 99% of what I need. When I'm showing up, okay, I'm going to be asking the salesperson, or I'm going to be asking the service person at the end of the phone a much tougher question. When I'm trying to solve problems, I'm solving much tougher questions and much tougher problems, and have to think critically way beyond anything I've done in the past. So the real question is, what does that worker of the future look like? Well, they're knowledge workers. We said, well, there's a small portion of the population that were knowledge workers 20 years ago. Then got more and more, then 50%. Well, sooner or later, okay, other than if you put a shovel in my hand and dig a ditch, and probably that will be, assisted in one way or another, it's going to be everyone's a knowledge worker. So now the question is, what do you do? So the trend is, I'm looking at knowledge workers as the workforce, but am I actually doing anything to address that? Not really. So what's going to go on? Well, we've seen productivity kind of plateau. So, and the plateau of productivity is really associated with the rise of the knowledge worker, because I've invested in the technologies, but haven't really caught up to the investment that has to be made in the workers. And you probably just noticed Amazon investing now hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to quote unquote reskill, retool their workforce. That's only the tip of the iceberg of what's going to happen. So that's one of the major trends.
Right. So in regards to the productivity plateau, what you're looking at here is some of the research that says, so in consideration of what Bob just said, what are some of the realities in the workforce today? And certainly one of them is information overload, right? With the digital transformation that every single one of our workforces is in, regardless of what industry, what geography, what size of your organization, Employees are absolutely overwhelmed with content. There is no want for content, right? They're getting it 24/7 in a variety of ways. Could be courseware, could be documents, could be email, could be videos, right? I'm sure if I polled each one of you, every single day you get at least, something along that line. So that is contributing to what you see in the middle column, which is employees are overwhelmed, right? They're saying, hey, I need help sorting out sort of the signal from the noise, as we call it, right? And so I can't deal with all of this information and be productive. So some of this might be contributing to the productivity decline that we saw on the slide before. Moreover, employees, and I'm sure all of you, like to work in networks. You don't get answers, you don't sort through information and get answers and make decisions in a vacuum. And if you do, right, you know the results of that. They like to work in networks, they like to collaborate, they like to share good ideas, they like to bounce ideas off of others and refine those. In the traditional hierarchical structure that most of us are in today, that gets done in a very limited fashion. Right? And then the flip side of that, some organizations are completely collaborative, more contributing to productivity decline as well because there's too much collaboration going on and no decisions being made that are informed decisions. It's just a bunch of talk and social sharings, right? So we find that if you see employees in these situations and you remove those distractions or those realities, 75% of employees are more productive to some extent. I can't tell you whether that's 1% or 90%, but any uptick in productivity, will be an impact to business results.
So I think we've seen the trend of open shared workspaces are now starting to revert back into closed workspaces, cubicles again, even closed office spaces. I don't know if you've seen that in your industries. I'm definitely seeing it with my own client base, but it speaks to the data of what you're seeing is that there are distractions and there are things that are taken away from the productivity of our people.
And it's going to be a tension that's going to be in the workforce, in the workplace, for probably another 5 or 10 years as we work all of that out. Because everything is now about the digital transformation, it's about the digital workplace, it's about the networks, it's about the collaboration, and you kind of can't have both, okay? It's not bistable. It can't be, it's either closed, silos, individual cubicles, back to that. Yeah. It's probably, in my guess, it's the last hurrah of the baby boomers, would be my guess. It's like, okay, it didn't work, okay, we're gonna go back to what worked for me, okay, and that doesn't work. So we will see the millennials and the Xers really take hold here in the next few years. And I think what we'll see is, again, open spaces, lots of collaboration places, and lots of operating as teams of teams, networks, as the real trend that finally gains full traction in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Yes, sir.
What about accountability?
Accountability for the team? Well, I mean, go ahead, take it. Yeah. We go.
So, yeah, if you're not being held accountable for something, don't bother, right, is the overall answer. And I'm about to get to it. It's one of the 4th trends that we saw where there's new metrics involved for accountability, right? And they deal with people and their contributions. Sure, we're always going to have metrics around revenue and defect rates and turnover rates of critical talent and, safety issues. Those are never going to go away, right? Those are part and parcel of business operations. Natalie opened up the conversation by saying, how many of us need people? None of that stuff would happen if you didn't have high-performing workers. So how are we holding them accountable? Now with this research, we're seeing we have new expectations around leaders holding folks accountable for the contributions that you are making to the business results. And those are around new metrics as they relate to people analytics and the way in which your critical thinking manifests itself into intellectual property for the organization. For the first time ever, IP will be a business metric that organizations will track and monitor to see how much of a contribution you and you and you and me and you and you are making to the business, right? And so if you're not making a contribution, chances are you're not going to be around much longer. So I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for
Great.
sure.
So do you want to start explaining your map?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So you want me to take the top half and you can take the bottom half?
And let's just explain what it is
Yeah,
first.
sure.
What we did, okay, and all of this today is based on a research study that Laci and I participated in and published last year. So it's through HR.com is the organization that conducted it. Global, over 1,000 folks responded to the survey. 880 were deemed appropriate in terms of a complete set of survey responses. Took that 880 organizations, which is made up of both HR and business across all industry verticals, global, and distilled that into to what the workers, the leaders of both HR and the business were kind of predicting for 2020. We did kind of close in because, in essence, 2020 is next year. And the question is, hey, you're really ready for the workforce of 2020? Because we've been talking about that now for the last 10 years, right? And kind of doing not much. So what you're going to see here are the trends that we teased out and the findings and some pretty interesting recommendations when it comes to the direction that people have to focus on in order to make the appropriate bets in the next 2 or 3 years so that they are competitive 5 years from now. Otherwise, they're probably going to be out of business. So with that in mind, what you have on your table is the infographic from that summarizing that study. And by the way, if you want a digital copy of the study or the handout, happy to provide that. All you need to do is give us your email address.
Okay, so I'll start. So the placemat in front of you, which looks like this, is just the distillation of the high points of this research report. So you can get more from this if you'd like the soft copy, as Bob said. So on the upper left-hand corner, what you're looking at are the 5 megatrends that this study revealed. So the first one was new structure. So organizations, as I started to mention, they are not going to get their best levels of productivity, right, if they continue to operate in a hierarchical structure. What does that mean? So that means most organizations today are still hierarchical. It is impossible to say, oh, okay, got it, we're going to go to networked, knowledge-powered networks. You don't flip a switch and that doesn't happen overnight. But you have to start thinking about what kinds of systems, what kinds of processes, what kinds of technology do you have in place today that you need to sort of revise, modify, add to, that's going to help move, even if it's incremental steps, from a traditional hierarchy to a knowledge-powered network. What do I mean by knowledge-powered, right? That actually means helping employees build knowledge and extract meaningful observations or insights from all of that content that they are currently overwhelmed with to make critical business decisions. And bringing them together in a structured network type arrangement is going to be more impactful to business results than a traditional hierarchy. That's one key finding. The next key finding is about new capabilities, right? And so this relates to mostly technology. So we're seeing new smart systems, new cognitive technologies, AI, augmented intelligence. As Bob said, a lot of that new capability in technology will automate positions. That's okay. The routine and the mundane are going to get automated. What's left is the workers that need to think at a higher order. So we need to start thinking about the technology that you have in place, both from an IT and a human capital perspective. What needs to change about that technology in regards to additions to or revisions of that are going to empower or enable a knowledge-powered network workforce, okay? New expectations is a third key finding. Both organizations and employees have new expectations. They don't want to come into work anymore, stay in their swim lane, and just, churn out the specific job responsibilities of that particular job responsibility. They want to be more expert at a higher level about more. So when we think of the newer, younger generations coming in, That's what they expect. And frankly, that's what the organization expects. The organization expects them to make a higher level contribution. So again, all of these have interactions and interplays between process, people, and technology about how to build the expertise of every single employee, not just particular talent segments, not just directors or not just senior leadership, every employee. New metrics, I mentioned new metrics already, right? So I won't dwell on that in the interest of time. If you have any questions about the metrics, stop me and I'll answer it. And then new speed, right? With the digital transformation, change is happening. We know the old cliche, there's nothing normal except change. Yes, but now it's happening at an even faster rate. So employees need to expect and anticipate change, not just try to tolerate it. They need to be able to work in a flow of work that allows them to be more agile, more productive, make better business decisions more quickly as the change evolves around them. So anticipating and expecting change, not just living with it. Those are the 5 key trends that the research sort of unveiled. What's really interesting on the upper right is a mere 11% of organizations only said that they are prepared to build a workforce capable of those 5 things to better impact business results. So by sheer numbers alone, right, 89% of us have an opportunity to do better on the left. So then we did one more level of correlation, and we said, so those of you who are financially performing better, right, what does that mean? So you can see on the upper right, the top financial performers, 55% are more likely to commit to what's on the upper left and prepare a workforce capable. So those already doing the things on the left and creating workers that are more capable of achieving better business results are doing the things on the left and getting better impact for it.
So with that in mind, we then started teasing out the next level of detail. So on the bottom, you actually see 10 key findings that are grouped into 3 categories. You notice they're all about expertise. So in essence, organizations, especially those that are up in that upper right-hand corner, effectively are now investing in their workers to help them be more productive by having them be more expert in what they do. Because they already have gone through all of that automation, et cetera, and now these workers are in fact answering tougher questions, participating in much more complex discussions, et cetera. So what are you giving them? Well, yeah, you can give them training, develop them from a talent standpoint, but you also have to put tools in their hands. And some of the tools, you probably use them, like the collaboration tools, Slack, Microsoft Teams, some of those tools they're putting into their hands in order to try to make them more expert by being able to tap the network that's available to them. Okay, but then they need more because we're always balancing that tension between I don't want to get them more overwhelmed. I want them to cut to the chase and get to what they need as quickly as possible. And especially with millennials and Xers, they have no patience to wade through even a 10-minute video, let alone an hour e-learning course. Forget that. So, what can you deliver to them in 30 seconds, in a minute? So that's where this whole concept of is collaboration now with the tension of time and the sense of urgency and the fact that all of these things are now starting to come together from a business agility standpoint. Things are changing like on a continuing basis.
Anybody have any questions on what they showed?
And are you seeing this? I mean, that's the real question. Are you starting to feel this yourself? Yes.
So my answer is yes, those type of people and every type of person, right? It's this whole discussion that we're having about elevating the capability of employees to make them more experts and accepting the fact that the routine and the mundane can be automated. Sure, it impacts the United Airlines flight attendant and impacts everybody else as well. When I first came into the United Airlines situation, there would be examples of job responsibilities they had that we were still training them out of a FAA flight manual that was this thick, right? So how to deploy a slide in the aircraft for an emergency. We're putting thousands of flight attendants through an hour-long instructor-led class to do that. Really? I can give you a 2-minute job aid that's on video to tell a flight attendant how to deploy a slide and then give them a test and see if they did it. That's what we did. So yeah, there was job automation there, right? And so that saved the company millions of dollars by the number of flight attendants that we train every year. But that was a sort of, on the line manual type of job responsibility. Yes, but for then what's left for the flight attendant, so if you extract that hour out of their day and you give them a 2-minute video, now they have 58 minutes to do something else with it. So now I have to figure out what can I do to elevate their level of thinking, make them more analytical thinkers and critical thinkers about every other thing they touch in their workday to better impact business results. So the answer is yes, them and everybody else too.
Let me give you a couple of more specific examples that she and I and myself and others have been working on. Because the obvious is anywhere where there's lots of knowledge workers. So what we're seeing is obviously professional services firms and healthcare and technology and financial services. All of that, that's a given. Okay, but think about walking into a automotive dealership. And now you're going to have a conversation with a salesperson. And think about that experience 10 or 15 years ago, and think about that experience now. And so think about that person is in fact now a knowledge worker. Before they were kind of a pure salesman and show you the, smell the leather and look at this little tidbit or whatever. Now you're walking in, you're probably more educated on that particular model than that salesperson. So that salesperson really needs to be a consultative salesperson who's going to be solving a lot of problems because you're going to come in with a lot of questions. You've already done all of the research. You know all of the data. You know the competitive models. You know everything. So how are you going to let them step up to that level of expertise and be that knowledge worker? We just did a demonstration project for one of the big automotive manufacturers here in the U.S., demonstrating how you would get that in the hands of both sales managers and sales consultants in dealerships. You're going to see that. Also, kind of think about your accountant. I just did this with Deloitte before I left. We spent 2 years on a task force saying, what is Deloitte's accountancy in the future? Because frankly, most of it is going to be automated. So, what does that accountant have to do with the client? Well, they're going to have to be able to interpret now all of the results and be able to be consultative with the client, where they never had to do that. That was a whole different part of Deloitte that was more of the advisory. Well, now guess what? If you want to be an accountant at Deloitte in the future, okay, the robots are going to take care of everything, okay? And I'll hand you the report, and you have to go and have that conversation. So we're seeing it literally touch, every single element of this. Maybe not this instant, but frankly, 5 years from now, I would think that 90+% of the jobs in this country and then certainly worldwide are going to be knowledge workers.
So Laci, can you expand on the findings more based on the research? What are the businesses saying that they need more?
Okay, great. Thanks, Natalie. So what you're seeing here is one of the questions that we asked is, what are the top 3 or 4 or 5, sort of influences or forces that are going to shape, well, we're calling it, Workforce 2020. It's basically the workforce of today, right? And interestingly enough, if you look at the gray bar, which is job automation, Almost, again, you can't pick up anything that doesn't talk about the impact of job automation. Frankly, that was the third, right? If you look at the top, smart technology and developing employee expertise were identified by these 880 global leaders as being the two top forces shaping Workforce 2020. And again, that is because we should not be worried about the quantity of jobs or the fewer jobs that will be left as a result of job automation. That's a given. Job automation is here, the routine and the mundane is getting automated, right? So now what we need to worry about is what is left. How do we build the quality of our workforce? And how do we use smart technology to help them, the number one choice, to help them become more expert in more areas to make better business decisions faster? That was the result from that question asked.
We've actually been trying.
Go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'll start. He can add in.
That was the segue right there.
I was actually just speaking with Lori back there about that. We were working with University of Phoenix recently on that. And, you know, academia, I won't say everybody, but a lot of folks, you know, again, whether it's elementary schools, high schools, colleges, online, or, you know, face-to-face, they're still very traditional, right? It's a lot of, here's the course syllabus that I've used year over year over year. Here's the litany of books or white papers that you have to read. And by show of hands, how many of you think that students actually go through all of that? Exactly, zero, right? From having two in my own household, all I would get is, how can I scan through this PDF? Give me the 2-minute highlight. Exactly, that's what everybody wants, is tell me what is the actionable, right? I don't want to read all of this when I don't have that much time. So we are working with academia in all of those areas to try to influence how they might need to make some changes to their current approach to, from the administration and the professor side, how they present information, and from the student side, how you absorb it and apply it. Right? It's no longer read it, memorize rules to regurgitate back on an exam, right? You're going to have to apply it to make critical business decisions and show me that in a business case or, you know, an example or something like that. So.
Yeah, I'll add 1 minute, and that is, they actually have good intention right now. So you probably noticed that there's more and more focus on critical thinking. Being able to take in content, be able to think critically, be able to rise above effectively the transactional, the regurgitating, et cetera. Okay? The only problem is the content, as you saw earlier on, is still overwhelming. Okay, you can't wade through how much content is being developed and pushed out every single day and be able to think critically. So there's again an issue associated with, you know, you've got a good intention, think critically, but the input to that critical thinking is not aligned. And so, you know, that is one of the major issues. The other thing that they're doing that I think is really healthy is whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, have totally acknowledged the fact that business and what they should be preparing for is a collaborative environment. We work in teams of teams, across the network. That's the way we work these days. So it isn't just one person going to make the contribution and get the big woo-hoo. You really be able to have the team be recognized for that, and the team has to contribute because the team is going to actually generate something that one individual probably could never come up with. But the problem is, again, what are you using as the basis for that team conversation, that team collaboration? We're at a bit of a holdup right now, and so we'll talk a little bit more as it goes along. Yeah.
And I think what it comes down to is that it still defaults to the organizations. At the end of the day, it's your problem. Right? You have to identify what it is, and you have to come up with a structure that's going to help extract the maximum potential out of your people no matter what.
Yeah, and that's great, Natalie. And I just want to say one thing that bridges your comment there and what you just said about the critical thinking piece. In another piece of research, not this one, in another piece of research, we asked business leaders and HR leaders, you know, what percentage of you would like your workforce to think critically? Duh. The answer was 94%, right? So, of course, 94%. I was surprised it wasn't 100. Like, what are the 6% doing? But anyways, so 94% said that they wanted their workforce to think critically. We said, how are they? So what percentage of them are? 4%, right? So again, you can go do a research study. I challenge you to go do it, right? Is critical thinking something that can be learned? Are you born with it? What? And there's both sides of the fence, right? But part of the issue is it's a skill, it's a muscle that you build up. If you're accustomed to coming in and just scanning through and not held accountable for what you read and taking action and applying that to the business, right? Then I'm just gonna read and say, great, thanks for sharing that with me, John, right? No one's holding me accountable to do anything with it. And so we've got tons of people in our workforce that do that. But in their defense, we have done very little as an organization to enable people to learn how to think critically, to develop that skill, right? Pandexio is one of those, right? I welcome any tool that helps me extract from the volumes of attachments I get in email every day. What is the meaningful observation in what I just got in my inbox today? Now I can start, now that I've cut through and found the signal from the noise, I can start to think about how I can apply that signal to what I'm held accountable to do that day, that week, that month, that year. And so just like we have tools for everything else, we mentioned Teams and Slack, and I saw some smiles over there. They have their place, right? They help us manage time. They help us collaborate within teams, whatever it may be. What do we have that helps us learn how to think critically? Like zero. Which is why when I started to do that work for TriBridge, now owned by DXC, and I saw Pandexio embedded into it, I said, hey folks, this is your differentiator in this solution. Right? This is what every single organization needs if you want to build a workforce of critical thinkers. So off my bandwagon, thank you for letting me go off script for a minute.
Well, I think we're still on this slide here, and we want to get back to organizational structure. So are there new organizational structures that are needed? What are those?
We'll keep it really short. The answer is yes. Okay, we have to acknowledge the fact that we need to be moving to teams of teams, and a network structure. And we're making some small advances in that. So if you know of a new science called organizational network analysis, that's designed to try to really kind of tease out all of those webs, all of those networks. I will challenge you with this. The problem is that if you still expect reporting, okay, you're evaluating performance on a hierarchical structure, and don't start to pivot towards a structure that also acknowledges the team and team performance, then you're going to not actually achieve the goal. So I'm going to keep going because we're getting close here.
So again, this is just a reiteration. If you looked at whatever color that is, orange on the right and blue, you add those numbers up, 73% of these 880 global and HR leaders and business leaders said, you know, our employees need to be experts. So one thing that this slide doesn't show is we said, so who in your organization needs to be experts? Is that, you know, the 7 top leaders or the 30 top leaders? Is it the engineers? Is it the, you know, the salespeople on the floor? So what do you think? What talent segment needs to be expert? Exactly, thank you. That was the answer. Everybody needs to be expert. Sure, there's going to be some variance. Some are going to be more expert than others. Some are going to have, you know, more accountability than others, depending on their role. But it is no longer acceptable to have any single employee in your workforce that comes in and is transactional, right, and checks a box to get their work done. Won't work for you, and not in Workforce 2020 and going on. If you intend to thrive and sustain your competitive position, get rid of those people. Cut to the chase and get rid of them. So 73% said to a greater extent or a much greater extent, my workforce needs to be expert, all of them that are left.
I wouldn't say get rid of them.
Well,
that's a little harsh.
Well,
but it's you notice what Amazon is doing. They are investing in effectively kind of retooling their workforce. Now, some will not make the cut, but there isn't a person that should not be able to do that, given the attention, the tools, et cetera, to address that.
So Bob, is there technology currently used to share worker insights?
Yeah, and you probably do it. Let's think about how we share insights right now. So, and I've always, over the last at least probably 20 years, been the go-to person from an expertise standpoint. I get barraged with questions because, supporting a proposal, supporting a new client discussion or a prospective client discussion. And so I'm asked the same question all of the time, and what do? Okay? I'll either answer it with a text, I'll answer it with an email, I'll attach 4 or 5 documents, maybe a total of maybe 80 pages of presentation material, a couple of white papers, whatever, and say, here it is, and you'll find the answer to your question in that. We call it attachment bombing. And so what we in essence are doing, okay, is the best way to communicate right now insights effectively is through email. And so, how much of that is insights? How much of that is the noise, okay, that I've got to now wade through? A lot. And how many times is that done over and over again? A lot. And so we now say, okay, well, Slack and Microsoft Teams and Yammer and a bunch of the collaboration tools, that's going to cut through it. Yeah, kind of, but now it's more discussions, and you're still not really cutting through that because you never really get to the nuggets. So the answer is, right now what we're doing is what we've probably done for the last 20 years. And so that's why we're ready for that next revolution.
I just want to know, is it working for everybody in here? It doesn't work for me every day.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't work for me every day. So if somebody else is doing it right or has evolved, I'd like to know. But okay, so that doesn't sound promising. So what about saving insights? How do the workers save their insights?
Yeah, right now they're really saving their insights through content. So SharePoint, all kinds of online databases. Oh, you like SharePoint, huh? You can search and find pretty quickly. We have what we have, and we're using what we have. And you're using it to the best, and you're always kind of putting additional patches, and so search, and then filtering, and then be able to figure out how to get to that content. But ultimately, you still get to content. So where are they saving their insights? They're kind of not. And so it is a frustration for most folks, and that's why at this point, I'm investing my time in Pandexio, because that's the problem that I'm personally trying to solve. After 45 years trying to do this, it's like time to solve it, because if we don't get it right now, guess what? We're probably not going to be competitive as a nation, and we probably won't be competitive in the world with that workforce that's going to exist. So.
And if I can just add to that, like the tool that Bob just mentioned, SharePoint, or your own folders on your local hard drive or whatever, where those tools were never designed, in their defense, to help them, to help the employee extract the meaningful insight out of all the content. So while they're helpful and useful in their own right, in their own regard, they're not going to accomplish what we've been talking about in terms of this research. Moreover, they actually make the problem worse when you're trying to identify the actual insights, because if you imagine yourself reading a PDF document that's critical, and then you go, like, a highlighter, whether you have a highlighter or an annotation tool like Evernote or whatever, you go, that's what I need, and you highlight it. What are you doing with it now? You're sticking that whole thing right back into the folder on your local drive, or you're saving it in SharePoint or something. 3 days later, a week later, even 3 hours later, you go, shoot, I need that right now. I got to go find it. Where is it? I can't even remember what folder I barely put it in, much less where it is in the document and which of those ones that I highlighted applies to the problem I'm trying to solve now. So now I've created more anxiety for myself, knowing that it's in there somewhere and I can't find the darn thing. Right? So those tools actually even make it worse versus if you didn't do anything at all, right? So
then, Laci, what strategies are now being employed to address these technology needs?
Yeah, got it, thanks. So I would say there's kind of 2 that are happening now, and on that one slide that we were just on, You can go ahead, Natalie, to workers of the future. Yeah, keep going to the two strategies at the end. Continuous learning and whatnot is what I'll talk about because we're kind of out of time here.
Perfect.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
So continuous learning, it was identified as sort of the #1 strategy that folks are going to kind of employ. That is because that is what we're doing today, right? That's what people are accustomed to. So on the research survey, you always check what you're accustomed to doing. But if you look at, the items beneath that, like, develop more experts, everything beneath that was all about expertise. And look at the percentages that people identified. So they are recognizing, right, that just a continuous learning strategy as we know it today, always finding means for workers to build skills, learn more, stay current. Those don't do anything to help build critical thinking, draw out expertise, make better business decisions faster with evidence. They don't do that. They help a flight attendant learn how to deploy a slide, right, by taking steps 1 through 6. As a primitive example. But they don't do the things that we're doing. So those next 5 results were all around building expertise, whether that's changing process, using new tools, embedding new org structure. So that was pretty critical. On the next slide was the second sort of strategy, which was help employees learn how to identify and sort and filter insights, not just content. Everything we've been talking about. So of all the content that we barrage them with every day, more content is not what we need to give them. They've got enough. It's, again, pulling out the meaningful observation and helping them through tools, through org structure, through collaboration, share with each other to use those insights to make better business decisions more quickly. Those were the top strategies.
And then let me make one quick comment, because we've been doing a lot of work with the 70-20-10 Institute out of Europe.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know what that means, but 70-20-10 is kind of drawing attention to percentages of where people learn. Okay, 10% is that formal learning. 70% is on the job, peer-to-peer is learning. Where does all of the investment go when it comes to learning and development? That 10%, okay, which we find is probably the least effective of the way people learn. And so, that's another thing in terms of continuous learning. When a learning and development organization thinks about continuous learning, they think about more investment in that 10%, rather than trying to figure out how to formalize all of that informal learning that's going on and actually now kind of tease out the real value that's there in a way that they've never really recognized is their responsibility. And so that is the big challenge with this whole concept of continuous learning, and then building that expertise and building the ability for people to think critically, et cetera, it's all messed up. It's where the investment is going is not that productive, but that's what L&D does, and that's who that's responsible. It's a total mishmash of focus, and that's what we're trying to bring clarity to.
thank you so much for sharing all that research and all the information you guys have come across. This is really fascinating information. I want to spend the next, 9 minutes or so just opening it up to you guys with questions. If you want to start with anything that you're curious about, or if you want to dig a little deeper in any of the topics they've discussed.
Absolutely, and in fact, all of this research was based on organizations responding that have at least a portion of their workforce being virtual workers, gig workers, because when you start thinking about, my focus is on full-time, maybe part-time, but they're employees. Well, no, most of your workers these days are no longer employees. and whether or not you're calling it contractors or gig workers or remote workers, that is the nature. So that's why if people start to move towards, hey, these are teams of teams, a network, they could be globally located, they could be co-located, they could be, in essence, kind of individually working on a part-time basis out of their homes. How do you now give them the environment, and that's a big part of that digital workplace, and now the structure in order for data to work. That was a big part of both this research and, in fact, what Laci and I have been focused on for probably the last 10 years. Yes. So there is a lot of thinking out there, but it's all supported by what we've just discussed.
Yeah. And I would say to that as well, his question about accountability was so important, and that's why we found through this research that new metric around, the people contribution to the intellectual capital is so important, because I don't care, if you're sitting in the Cove or you're going to, a formal office. Doesn't really matter where you are or when you work. It matters that you're making a contribution to business results. That's what matters. Right? And so, yes, there are still some organizations that are very traditional, that people report to an office from 9 to 5 or whatever it may be, and people are walking around. My daughter works in one, walking around at 5 o'clock that say, oh, is she still here? Is she still here? Well, you can be sitting at your desk doing nothing, but if you're still there at 5:20, you get the plus mark, right? That doesn't matter. It matters, did she make contributions during the day, any point, night, morning, whatever, to business goals? So when you asked that question, I had to stop and think, because these results assume any profile of any worker, whether you're going to the office or you're remote or you telecommute or you're part-time or you're gig or your contract or your 1099.
The beauty right now is, because we are moving into that digital workplace, the amount of data that's available to us, not to look over the shoulder of the worker, but to really kind of gauge the way that people are working, contributing, et cetera, is completely different than it was even 5 years ago. So now mining that data, thinking about how to, in essence, take that data, port it into, visualization tools, dashboards, other things that you're putting in now the hands of the manager, whatever that means in the future, where they could have a virtual team scattered worldwide, but now they actually can kind of see what's going on, not from a transaction standpoint, but from that contribution standpoint. And then number two, the fact that you have all of this data, I can now mash the data together. Okay, so now I talk about performance support. Performance management. Okay, well, it's very, very traditional in many organizations in terms of what defines performance management, and you were kind of implying it's on an individual basis. But with all this data, I can mash all of this together and now actually tease out the way that the team is functioning, the contribution that individuals are making to that team, the team's contribution to the success of the company. All of that I can actually now start to reward, recognize, et cetera, that I've never been able to do before because of the fact that we're in that digital workplace and that I've got that data available. It's just, I got to use my head to say, 1 + 1 = 3. Right now, it's kind of 1 + 1 = 0 is where I'm still sitting. So, sorry. Yeah. Others?
I'm going to open
Great
back
question.
up.
Thank
I
you,
know
thank
you
you.
want to say something. I just feel it. No?
Actually, it depends on the industry vertical. So one of our most successful clients at Pandexio is actually, they're about 150 people. They're a Workday system integrator. And so they're small, but they're growing like crazy. They're in technology. They operate in teams on projects. They're onboarding a number of folks a month. And so a small company, it's got just as much of an issue as one of our clients is a large pharmaceutical global pharmaceutical firm that does tons of research and new product development and clinical trials and the like. They're talking tens of thousands of people. We're not actually seeing, oh, this just applies to big companies or small companies. It applies to all companies right now. Well, let us chat with you after, because we have a solution that I don't think anybody, like I said, John and I and Laci have this is kind of our dream is to in essence solve the problem of the worker of the future, which is now. That's kind of the legacy we want to kind of leave, if possible. We'd love to have that conversation.
Well, if we don't have any other questions.
I just have one comment to
Oh,
add.
please.
Thank you. You know,
of course.
I'm looking at the clock. We got 2 minutes. But,
Use them.
you know, when we did this, yeah, you're geeked out. You're geeked out. He's geeked out over engineering stuff. He's geeked out over attorney stuff. I get geeked out over data. And when we did this study, it was all about the workforce, right? When I got the data, I started thinking critically and analyzing it and saying, what does this mean, right? And for me, I just like to say out loud, because 2 things came out for me that was not just about the person, but the organization, right? When you do build a workforce full of critical thinkers who are experts, who are making better business decisions faster, it does 2 things that are top of mind today for senior business and HR leaders. And one, that is employee experience. If you're in HR or you can't get through the day without hearing about employee experience. So employee experience, right, is all about how you're creating a culture, an environment, providing the right tools to make employees feel that they are valued, they have a voice, they're making a contribution, they're not just a number. Well, if I'm talking about building expertise at every level of worker, and now I'm democratizing talent to be able to make contribution to a business result, if that's not building employee experience, I don't know what is. So that was one observation that I made from this data, that we never asked about employee experience. And then 2, we've said over and over again about accountability and business results. To me, that's organizational agility. Organizational agility is all about how your employees are making contributions that minimize your business risk. That's organizational agility. Well, if I've got a workforce full of critically thinking experts, I stand a much better chance of minimizing business risk than if I have the transactional worker in there checking the box. Right? So the results of this data told me it's not just about changes that we just all walked through about the workforce of the future, which is here right now, but it's about if we do those things, those 5 things in the upper left, now we're building a better employee experience and we're increasing organizational agility, which I think is absolutely huge. So thanks.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, we see it every day that there's an attachment of when you can attract the right people and then keep them there and engaged longer, the revenue of your business goes up, right? And that's everyone's goal, is to keep that trend going up. And it's these type of taking data and really trying to implement it in your organization the right way makes the impact. So thank you so much for sharing all this information and being here today. They flew in from Las Vegas, so it was a special treat to have them here today. And I really appreciate you guys all coming and listening. And if you have any more questions, we're all here a little bit longer too, so don't feel like it has to end. But in closing, thank you again, Bob and Laci, for providing all this great content.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Kara, did you have any further announcements? Oh yeah, you can talk to me.
And if you want again a digital copy of the research study, of the placemat, or of this presentation, Kara has a copy of all 3. Just tell her, hey, I'd love to have a copy. She'll forward it to you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.